Hello, everybody. This is Frank with Iron Age News. It's Monday, April 27th, 12:44 p.m., and we're going to talk about a news item that is going off the radar due to the attempted assassination again of President Trump. And that is two Americans that have been reported killed in a gun battle involving Maoist guerrillas in the Philippines. Okay. This is not some far-flung operation somewhere. This is not Los Angeles or any other places, but in the Philippines, alongside or at the minimum inside of the operational orbit of the communist insurgency known as the New People's Army. I can't say there were members of it because they just showed up in town, but they were not there to be friendly to orphans or save the dolphins or things like that, as far as we know. And that should have set off alarms in Washington, but somebody tried to kill the president again. That is a big problem on its own. Instead, it has not been registered by many Americans, and it should have been because this is the latest and most obvious example of an issue that we are afraid has occurred or is occurring. And that is the United States becoming a staging ground, not necessarily for direct attacks, but for ideological radicalization, recruitment, and operational pipelines feeding conflicts overseas? Now, tonight we examine this, which is the deaths in Negros, okay? The long insurgent history of the Philippines and what this may reveal about the blind spots we have here in America. So, backstory: for decades, the Philippines has been a nation fighting wars on multiple fronts. On the one side, there's communist revolution, and on the other side, you have Islamic militancy. The communist movement traces back to the Communist Party of the Philippines, which was founded in 1968, and its armed wing, which is involved in this story, the New People's Army, which was founded in 1969. They are inspired by Maoist doctrine. The movement built itself on peasant organizing, labor unrest, political indoctrination, and guerrilla warfare. For years, it was one of Asia's most resilient insurgencies. And at the same time, in the southern islands of the Philippines, they were racked by Islamist violence from Abu Sayyaf, which you have heard of before. And that was kidnappings and piracy. They're more of a criminal organization. Kidnappings, piracy, and to the extremist networks that pledged alliance at times to transnational jihadist causes, probably from Indonesia or wherever. We will not speculate. This was not one insurgency, it is many or was many, and Manila has spent generations trying to keep them from tearing the state apart. Then comes this revelation, which is in the last 2 to 3 days. You can go look up other articles on your own because it's worthwhile seeing the other stories, considering who's writing them. CNN, I think, had one that totally made it sound like these guys were tourists. So two Americans, and by Americans we mean nationalized. One was born here. You can look it up once again. It's a situation where we use the term Americans, and then something's going on, right? And that's Lyle Prijoles and Dana-Rene Sorem. I think that may be two different names operating there, were killed in a clash involving the particular communist guerrillas we're talking about in part of the country known as Negros Occidental. All right. So both reportedly had ties to US based Filipino activist quotations networks. Both were connected publicly to Anak Bayan USA. One, which is Lyle, was also linked to Malaya Movement USA. These guys are not tourists. They were not missionaries. They were not random bystanders caught in the wrong place at the wrong time. They were politically active individuals who traveled from Activism USA in California, probably, look it up, into a live insurgent battle space overseas. And within a week are dead. And they got there pretty quickly. That is part of the timeline when you discuss this. How did this happen? Blah, blah, blah. Because movements into clandestine conflict zones require a bit of infrastructure and a bit of know-how. You have to have, we'll just throw some ideas out there. Who are your contacts? How does your transport work? Where are the safe houses? Communications? Who's the handler? local reception networks, because you are going to meet with known terrorist killers. What's your ideological preparation so that you get along with the known terrorist killers? Right? How are you being vouched for? How did you get into the country in the first place? Right? They stepped off the airplane into a guerrilla war and gun battle, basically, considering that it wasn't even anywhere near the airport. But that's another story entirely. People do not usually step off of airplanes and accidentally find themselves involved in a guerrilla operational territory and a gun battle with national forces. So that raises a harder question, which is this simply activism crossing dangerous boundaries, or is it evidence of a pipeline? And if it is a pipeline, who built it? Was it purely domestic activism? Is it the diaspora itself organizing? Is it underground revolutionary networks, as we've seen operating all throughout the United States against the United States government? Criminal financing, or did they get their money from Act Blue, right? Or something darker, which would be something similar to a foreign intelligence, a covert facilitation, or a strategic exploitation by hostile states. No public evidence currently points to the People's Republic of China or the Chinese Communist Party. That's our disclaimer in this case. That matters. Speculation is not proof, but strategy is about asking who benefits. China is in a growing confrontation with the Philippines in the South China Sea, where Beijing presses expansive military and maritime, we'll say, military and maritime claims against Filipino territory and the energy rich waters that surround it. If Manila is distracted by insurgency, by domestic instability, political fracture, its maritime resistance weakens. That is strategic reality. Now, whether that intersects with the story at this point is unknown. We don't have anybody on the ground, obviously. Although we put out some feelers, we'll hear what we hear. But intelligence professionals would be wise to ask the question. And perhaps the biggest issue is here at home. America is wide open, and that openness is a strength, but it is also exploitable. Political activism is protected. Cultural organizing is protected. Community advocacy is protected. And we found out probably sponsoring Nazi terror as a group that's hunting Nazi terror is also protected. But somewhere in rare and dangerous cases, lawful activism can become ideological grooming. Ideological grooming can be operational support. The line is often invisible until one is wandering through the streets of Negros Occidental and finds two dead Americans. Dead because they didn't dead to Filipinos. You got to look at it that way. It wasn't like they tied them up and murdered them. This is a fight. So the deaths in Negros may prove to be an isolated tragedy, or they may be an early warning for future operations. A warning that America's activist ecosystems, the diaspora networks, because there are many flourishing Filipino communities throughout the United States, that is not interested in overthrowing the Filipino government or interested in spreading Maoist philosophy in the United States. However, the possibility deserves some scrutiny into these fringe elements. Not panic, not hysteria. Let's not round all the Filipinos up, because we didn't do that to anybody else recently anyway, who have demonstrated problems in the United States. Just some scrutiny, because national security has blind spots that rarely stay blind forever. Eventually, they will come into view. So that's what we have for now. It is worth keeping an eye on that if you're so interested, because if that is the case and they are all coming and making this the new Libya, if those of you remember how Libya was with training other terrorists, does that mean we're going to have more people come here, go on welfare while they learn how to be a bigger and better terrorist, and then go to another country and press the revolution? We don't know. But it is worth exploring this. If you were in the foreign intelligence game, this is worth exploring. So on that note, have a wonderful day. It is a little gloomy out here today, but what can I tell you? See you all later on.